Imagine waking up every night at the exact moment 6 people were murdered in your home and feeling something ancient staring back at you from the darkness. That is what happened to the Lutz family in the winter of 1975 when they moved into 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York, a house that had already soaked its floorboards in blood just 13 months earlier. This is not a ghost story. This is not folklore passed down through generations. This is a documented case investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren, 2 of the most respected names in paranormal research, and what they found inside that house would challenge everything most people believe about the nature of evil. On November 13, 1974, a young man named Ronald DeFeo Jr. walked through the halls of his family home in the quiet Long Island suburb of Amityville and systematically shot every member of his family while they slept. His parents, his 2 brothers, and his 2 sisters were all found face down in their beds, none of them having moved or cried out during the massacre. The scene disturbed even seasoned homicide detectives. It was as if the entire family had been sedated or frozen in place. DeFeo himself claimed that voices in the house had commanded him to kill. He told investigators that the house spoke to him, that something inside those walls wanted blood. He was convicted on 6 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. But his claims about the house were dismissed as the desperate fabrications of a guilty man trying to avoid responsibility. What no one knew at the time was that DeFeo might have been telling the truth. 13 months after the murders, George and Cassie Lutz bought the house at 112 Ocean Avenue for a price well below market value. They knew about the murders. The real estate agent had disclosed the history, but they needed a home for their blended family, and the price was right. Cassie had 3 children from a previous marriage, and George was ready to start fresh with his new family in a large house by the water. They moved in during December 1975 with hope and excitement. 28 days later, they fled in the middle of the night, leaving behind every possession they owned, and they never went back. What happened during those 28 days has been debated, dissected, and doubted for nearly 50 years, but the testimonies remain consistent and disturbing. George Lutz began waking up every single night at exactly 3:15 in the morning. He would sit up in bed, wide awake, gripped by a compulsion he could not explain. 3:15 was the estimated time of the DeFeo murders. George had no way of knowing this when it started. He became a different person inside that house. His wife described him as cold, distant, and increasingly violent in his moods. He stopped shaving, stopped caring for himself, and spent hours staring into the fireplace. Cassie suffered brutal nightmares and woke feeling hands on her body when no one was there. She saw a hooded figure standing by the fireplace one night, watching her. The children began speaking to an invisible friend they called Jody, a pig-like creature that communicated with them through the window of their bedroom. Cassie saw glowing red eyes staring at her from outside that same window one night. The house itself began to change. A green gelatinous slime oozed from the walls and dripped from keyholes. Swarms of flies filled the sewing room even though it was the dead of winter. Cold spots appeared throughout the house, and a nauseating odor came and went without explanation. One room in the basement had been painted entirely red, and the family dog refused to go near it. When George forced the dog inside, it cowered and whimpered as if in pain. Cassie began levitating off the bed at night, while George watched in horror, unable to move or speak. Doors slammed, voices whispered, scratches appeared on Cassie's body. The family was being tormented by something that wanted them gone or worse. Desperate for help, the Lutzes reached out to a local Catholic priest named Father Mancuso and asked him to come bless the house. Father Mancuso agreed and arrived one afternoon to perform the blessing. As he moved through the rooms, sprinkling holy water and reciting prayers, he was suddenly slapped across the face by an invisible force. A voice, deep and guttural, commanded him to get out. Father Mancuso fled the house. Within days, he fell seriously ill, with a high fever and painful blisters on his hands. He would later tell investigators that he believed something in that house had attacked him and that it was beyond his ability to confront. On January 14, 1976, after just 28 days, the Lutz family packed what they could carry and left 112 Ocean Avenue in the middle of the night. They never returned. They left furniture, clothing, toys, and all their belongings behind. When reporters asked George Lutz why they abandoned everything, he said simply that nothing they owned was worth going back into that house. Word of the Lutz family's experience spread quickly, and it reached Ed and Lorraine Warren, a husband and wife team of paranormal investigators who had been researching hauntings and demonic activity for over 2 decades. Ed was a demonologist and Lorraine was a clairvoyant, and together they had investigated some of the most violent and dangerous cases in the country. They agreed to take on the Amityville case and traveled to Long Island to conduct a formal investigation of 112 Ocean Avenue. What they discovered would become one of the most famous and controversial paranormal cases in history. Lorraine Warren entered the house and immediately felt what she described as a crushing, oppressive energy. She said the house was saturated with evil, that something ancient and malicious had attached itself to the location. It was not the spirit of a murder victim. It was not a residual haunting. It was something demonic, something that had been there long before the DeFeo family and had used the murders to strengthen its hold on the property. Ed Warren theorized that Ronald DeFeo had been manipulated by this entity, that the voices he claimed to hear were real, and that the demon had orchestrated the murders to create a foundation of trauma and despair. Blood had been spilled in that house, and blood, according to Ed, was a doorway. During the investigation, photographer Gene Campbell set up a time-lapse camera to capture images overnight while the team was away. When the film was developed, one photograph showed what appeared to be a small boy standing at the bottom of the staircase. The figure had glowing eyes and a pale face. No children were in the house that night. The image, known as the Amityville Ghost Boy photograph, remains one of the most analyzed and debated pieces of evidence in paranormal research. The Warrens classified 112 Ocean Avenue as one of the most dangerous locations they had ever investigated. The entity inside was not passive. It had demonstrated the ability to manipulate human behavior, influence emotions, and manifest physically. It had driven out a family in less than a month and had successfully attacked a priest. Ed Warren believed that without a formal exorcism conducted by the church, the entity would remain. Father Mancuso had tried to bless the house and had been repelled. The Catholic Church reviewed the case but ultimately declined to perform an exorcism. The Lutz family never went back, and the demon was never removed. In the years that followed, other families moved into 112 Ocean Avenue. Some reported strange occurrences. Others claimed the house was perfectly normal. The distinctive quarter circle windows on the 3rd floor, which had become iconic in photographs of the house during the Lutz occupation, were eventually removed during renovations. The address was changed to discourage the endless stream of curiosity seekers and ghost hunters. The house still stands today, altered and repainted, but it remains one of the most infamous addresses in America. In 1977, author Jay Anson published The Amityville Horror, based on interviews with the Lutz family and the findings of the Warren investigation. The book became a massive bestseller and was adapted into a film in 1979 that terrified audiences worldwide. The case brought Ed and Lorraine Warren into the public eye for the first time and launched them into a career that would span decades and include investigations of the Perron family haunting, the Enfield poltergeist, and the Annabelle doll. But for Ed Warren, Amityville was always different. He said until the day he died that 112 Ocean Avenue was genuinely evil and that what happened to the Lutz family was real. Skeptics have questioned the Lutz account for years. Some claim it was a hoax designed to make money. Others point to inconsistencies in the timeline or the involvement of DeFeo's defense attorney in early meetings with the family. But no one has been able to explain the photograph of the boy on the stairs, the documented illness of Father Mancuso, or the fact that the Lutz family abandoned a house they had just purchased and never returned. No one disputes that 6 people were murdered in that house, or that Ronald DeFeo claimed to hear voices. And no one has been able to prove that Ed and Lorraine Warren, 2 investigators with decades of experience and reputations built on credibility, were lying about what they found. Whether you believe in demons or not, 112 Ocean Avenue remains a place where something unexplainable happened, where a family was terrorized, where blood was spilled, and where 2 of the most respected names in paranormal investigation concluded that evil was not just a concept, but a presence that could inhabit a place and destroy anyone who entered. The house still stands, quiet now, its windows replaced and its story fading into legend. But for those who were there, for those who investigated, and for those who believe, Amityville will always be the place where the darkness won. Hashtags. Number Amityville Horror, number Ed and Lorraine Warren, number True Paranormal, number Haunted House, number Demonic Haunting, number Paranormal Investigation, number Ghost Stories, number True Horror, number Supernatural History, number Real Haunting, number Warren Files, number Creepy History, number Paranormal Documentary, number Horror History, number Vanishing Roads. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented paranormal case files. All events reference real investigations by Ed and Lorraine Warren.